Welcome to Center of Light. Keith Anthony Blanchard here. Got a fantastic interview for you tonight. I don't really know Brad, but I know Brad. I've been watching him for a while. We're going to take a trip to Antarctica tonight via South America. Brad recently went down there. He went to do some researching. A couple of adverts before we get down to Center of Light Radio. Beeswax. I think I'm going to create or land a date for the Power Connection Purpose course in a couple of weeks when I get back from South Louisiana. For those who have paid for your seat, hang tight. I have you written down. I won't forget. 6-week bust you wide open course, Power Connection Purpose. Live video form like you see now. 4 models for alignment, which will throw you into immediate experience. You can question and answer me anytime during the 6 weeks course. Very small fee. But what it requires most is all of you. You have to invest yourself to have this experience congeal, integrate, exponentiate, graduate into your life. Also, July 31st, my new worldwide distribution, worldwide publishing book with John Hunt's Publishing, Homecoming, Crossing the Bridge to the Soul. Stay tuned for more info about that. Please feel free to share this to you all. Go to youtube.com/Center of Light Radio and subscribe to my page. Give me some thumbs up. Leave me some comments. Let me know what kind of guest you want me to bring more onto Center of Light Radio. I'd be more than happy to do that. It's always about not really thinking outside the box. There is no box. But more so going in to where that causal universe is infinite. I usually go a little long-winded, but I want to talk to Brad. I want to see what he's been up to. Let me tell you a little bit about my guest tonight. Tonight my guest is Brad Olsen. We're talking about hidden anomalies of Antarctica and South America. Brad is an author of 9 books, including 2 in his Esoteric Series, Modern Esoteric and Future Esoteric. An award-winning author, book publisher, and event producer. His keynote presentations and interviews have enlightened audiences at Contact in the Desert, Wow, Awareness, Life Expo, the 5D events, and dozens of radio, including Coast to Coast, Ground Zero, and Fade to Black with Jimmy Church, and television shows including Ancient Aliens, America Unearthed, Beyond Belief, and Mysteries of the Outdoors. Brad is a founder and co-producer of the Weird Street Faire and SOMA neighborhood of his home base, San Francisco. The Chicago native's esoteric writing continues to reach a wide audience while he continues breaking ground, literally, or ice, in alternative journalism, public speaking, illustration, and photography. I'm going to drop a group of links from Brad into the forum. Make sure you stomp your feet all over his pages, y'all. Show him that you want to check him out. My brother Brad, welcome to Center of Light Radio.
Hey there, Keith. Nice to be on with you again. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
What in the world brought you to Antarctica? What was the fishing lure that said, I'm packing my bags, I'm going away and see some ice for a while? What was that all about?
Well, it's been a lifelong adult dream of mine since I started traveling in my young 20s independently with a backpack, Europe and then around the world, to make it to all 7 continents, the hardest one being Antarctica, but also because in the field I'm in and conferences I speak at, there's a lot of rumors as to what might be going on down there and what might be found. So I wanted to go firsthand. I'm a researcher, not a regurgitator, so I prefer to learn these things and see it with my own eyes. And that was the motivation. Plus I had the time, the money, and the desire to do it. And those are the 3 essentials from my very first book called World Stompers, which is a go-to guide for how to travel around the world. And it's still in print. Still does pretty good.
How many hours were you in transit, bro?
Jumping right into it, are you? Okay. Well, it was a sailboat, 74-footer, with my partner, Emily Infinity, and we were joined by 11 Poles and one other American. So there were 14 of us, and it was a 92-hour journey from dock to dock, or Anchorage in Arktowski, which are the islands outside of the Palmer Peninsula of Antarctica. And 92 hours, just under 4 days, and that's pretty much record time in a sailboat. But our captain had not done this before, and he saw the tail end of a storm getting us down there a lot quicker, which it did. But it also got us very sick, and it was 3 days of vomiting and really not moving from the bunk.
Yeah, I thought you might have taken a plane. So you want to start, Brad, did you go to South America first? Did you stay there? How long? You want to start there and then make our way towards Antarctica?
Yeah, because it was about 3 months traveling through South America before Emily and I got on the boat. So we started in Santiago, Chile, just almost a 1-year anniversary. It'll be just after Halloween last year, getting down to Santiago in early November, buying a vehicle that was already outfitted with a bed, a refrigerator, stove, propane tank on the ceiling, on the roof, and storage areas above and below. It was already outfitted from a guy who drove it down from Quebec, Canada, with his wife for 15 months. And he had to cross over to Argentina, and he couldn't with the vehicle because it had Canadian plates. So he's willing to sell it to me at a fairly good price. And I drove about 4,000 miles on that car. I went all the way from, took us about a week to get the permits and everything sorted through this company called Suzy Santiago. And then Emily and I had to catch up with the tour that was going on with Nassim Harriman and Brian Forrester in Peru. So I had to take 1,500 miles under our belt in a little less than a week, up the Chilean coast, over the border of Peru, then up elevation to over 12,000 foot from sea level on the first day. And then we both got altitude sickness from that as well. Fortunately, I was enough to drive the next day, and I went over a mountain pass. It was 6,600 feet high. And I was just comparing it with all the hikes of mountains I've done and in Nepal trekking. This was actually the highest point on land I've ever been. Fortunately, it was driving. I didn't get out and hike it, but that was pretty cool. Going through the Altiplano and the high areas of Peru and Bolivia is quite a sight to see. So we did the 16-day tour with the Resonance Academy and Nassim Harriman. Brian Forrester went to all the megaliths, and we could talk about any of these individually you'd like. Then to Lake Titicaca, ancient Incan sites, through Bolivia, and then all the way down Argentina, which is the 8th largest in surface area country in the world. It's huge. And that's where most of the miles were put on the car. And then we got down to Ushuaia just before New Year's Eve and started inquiring about boats. Had not made a reservation or anything other than just showing up on the docks. And that's how we made it happen with the sailboat.
How was the sailing journey other than needing some Dramamine? I mean, did you enjoy being on the water for that length of time and just being on the ocean? And automatically the song Little River Band, Cool Change comes to mind, right? How was the sailing journey, brother?
Well, I've sailed a bit with my dad. I was more experienced than Emily, including some ocean voyages as well as around the Great Lakes on sailboats that my dad has had. So I was a little more experienced, and once we got there, the channels were just fine. It wasn't rough water, and we didn't get sick again even on the way back, which took 6 days to get back because we had to tack against the wind, and we could have almost gotten back to the Beagle Channel, but many of the guys on the boat wanted to see Cape Horn, which is the famous southern mountain tip of South America that has sunk many a ships rounding Cape Horn. It is to sailors or mariners much as Mount Everest is to climbers. So to see Cape Horn is quite a feather in your cap for a sailor or captain. And we saw it off in the distance. That's where the Atlantic and the Pacific cross. Real intense winds, tides, storms. The Drake Passage between southern South America and the northern tip of the Palmer Peninsula is notoriously the roughest ocean seas in the world. I can tell you it was for us. But on the way back, we had already gotten our sea legs on and taken our Dramamine on time and did not get sick. But for the 15 full days that we were in Antarctica, every day was a new adventure. Every day was a new drop anchor, and we were going somewhere else in the vicinity. And traveling probably about 1,000 nautical miles through the channels and into Deception Island Bay, live active volcano, and then out to 6 research stations. And that's where I tried to talk to everybody I could about the many mysteries that we've heard about Antarctica.
When you left the States, I know you said it took 96 hours in transit, but how long were you gone for from when you returned back to the mainland to, integrate everything that you learned?
Yeah, it was almost the full month of February, although we left in third week of January. It was 26 days total. And then we had 2 weeks to catch our flight out of Buenos Aires, and I still had the vehicle. And we came back, the battery was dead, and other things had gone wrong because it's so cold down there. Just shocked the car, or maybe something was left on, I'm not sure. Jumped the battery, got it going. Survived a huge wind and dust and rock pebbles flying at us windstorm in southern Patagonia, which tweaked one of the doors. Emily was getting in, and it blew it so hard open that it was always bumping itself. Plus, we were having tire issues with the top part. There were other things that were going wrong with the car, and I'm down in this southern Patagonian town, and some guy walks into the cafe. We're working on the internet, and he flashed me a wad of cash. He goes, "Is that your car out there? I want to buy it from you. I saw you had it for sale on Trans Pacific car website where I bought it from. I found it there and put one ad up, and somebody recognized me, and I sold it. And then we took a bus to Buenos Aires and then a ferry over to Uruguay and spent our last week just as tourists in Uruguay, and then flew out of there. So 4-month trip, but Antarctica right towards the back end of that trip.
So earlier you mentioned you wanted to touch your feet on every continent on the earth, and Antarctica being the most difficult, obviously was the last one.
It was.
But all of a sudden, here comes this other motivation. What is happening under the ice? So now we have this motivating factor that there could be these anomalies, these extraterrestrial anomalies, if that's what you were referring to. How cold was it? Was it just like blistering cold? I mean, is it something at this certain time of year that was tolerable? Or let's start with the cold. Was it just cold as shit?
Part of my talks at the conferences is about misconceptions of Antarctica. And it is a misconception that it's always frigidly cold. There were 2 days the sun was out. One of those days, Luke Dog and I jumped in the ocean, did the polar plunge, and just dried off naked. Another time we jumped in at the Vernansky Ukrainian base, who had a sauna, did the polar plunge with icebergs floating around. And it's not that stingingly cold all the time. It was cold. It snowed on the boat one time. But just like our Arctic in the summer, you can have warm days. And we had a couple warm days where we were in our bathing suits and took our shirt off and laying up on the deck, and it felt great. So it just depends. That's why everybody who does go to Antarctica goes starting next month to early March, and then the season's over. I have a friend who works at McMurdo, another one of the American bases. I went and visited the Palmer base, and he is signed up to work this season, and they just went down there this week. So people who have signed up for seasonal staff, they're heading down now for about 4 months.
So you arrive to Antarctica, crunch, crunch, you step off the boat. How long before you got to your destination of why you were there? Were there some things that you wanted to go see about Antarctica before all this hype came along about what's buried under the ice and all that stuff? What was your path there, your itinerary?
It actually started on New Year's Eve when we were invited to the Ushuaia Yacht Club New Year's Eve party. And there were about 50, 60, 70 people there through the night, almost all of them working on or captains of ships or something to do with the Antarctica and yachting community. So there was a lot of people that were very knowledgeable. So my questioning started there. So did Emily's. All night we stayed at the party till the sun came up. And then when we were on our boat, we made the request that we'd try to go to as many research stations as we could, most especially the Palmer base, which I was very instrumental in getting our permission to go ashore, because that particular one, they're doing some pretty serious science that I could tell you about. And they don't request many, they don't allow many requests to come ashore because they can't be bothered. But since we are three Americans, I think we had, we could put up the taxpayer card, and since it was one of the National Science Foundation funded through our government programs that paid everybody, they accepted our request. And so we went to Palmer, and we went to 5 other different countries' research bases, including 2 that were British. And I only count that as one because they're both, one was abandoned and is a museum, and the other is a museum where people work and they open it up every day. There's penguins all around. All the bases had all these penguins just living right outside their doors. So we also went to the Chilean base, the Argentinian base on Palmer Peninsula, Ukrainian base I mentioned, British base I mentioned, American base I mentioned, and what was the 6th? Oh, the Polish base that we first arrived at on South Shetland Islands in Admiralty Bay, and that's where we saw some glaciers.
No German base.
There
No.
are German bases. In fact, it's funny you bring that up, because when I was doing my preliminary research for about a year leading up to this trip, I was very interested in that New Schwabenland area, and I found some maps. You'll find this really interesting, Keith. Right after the Cold War, in fact, all the way up to the time of the Berlin Wall coming down, when it was East and Western Germany, the German bases never left that area. They stayed as West German bases in at least 2 locations. So that's pretty interesting that the Germans never vacated that area that the Nazis claimed in the 1930s and named New Schwabenland. I would love to go back to that area and take a Geiger counter and see if indeed it had been nuked during Project Argus. And some reports I've heard is that it's all shot up, that there was some kind of battle that took place there. But that also ties into Admiral Byrd, who went down there in 1946 and was quickly turned around and aborted a 6-month mission and quirked to a journalist from Chile that wars in the future will confront an enemy that have craft with the ability to travel from pole to pole at incredible speeds. And last I checked, we still don't have acknowledged craft that can travel pole to pole at incredible speeds. And this article came out in early 1947. So technology that's over 70 years old, but at that time doesn't seem like it was one of ours, unless, of course, the Nazis were working on this highly advanced saucer craft. And that's something else I make mention in my conference lecture, to show people where New Schwabenland is and how hot springs run through there, a place called the Schumacher Ponds that never freeze. The whole continent of Antarctica is very geothermically active. 91 active volcanoes on the continent, making it the most volcanically active continent in the world. It's also the 5th largest continent in the world. It's about the size of 2 Australias, or lower 48 and Canada combined. It's huge. The distances are very vast. So to try to go to a far-flung location like New Schwabenland from the Palmer Peninsula would have been about as far as saying, let's go to South Africa. It's a long distance. In fact, South Africa is the best way to go to New Schwabenland, just like the New Zealand is the bounce-off point to go to McMurdo Base and South Pole. So there's these 3 directional areas where Americans have bases. And you can also go to South Pole from South Africa too, but it is quite farther than the Palmer Peninsula region where I went. And so we went for about 1,000 miles, I'd say, through the islands and the channels around northern tip of the Palmer Peninsula. And it's stunningly beautiful. The animals are very not used to seeing humans, so they have no fear of humans. You can go right up to a mother penguin and her chick with your iPhone. Just go right up to her. I have some pictures within a foot away. And she's like trying to look around you like, hey, who's just blocking my view? Get out of the way. So the animals have no fear. They're just very curious. We had a couple of whales, right whales, very rare whales, swim under our boat at one point that I got the video of, and I show that in my conference talk at the very end. So just finished my last 2 conferences of the year, and I have new ones coming up in Cocoa Beach, Florida in January, UFO MegaCon Laughlin, Nevada, middle of February, where I'll be giving this talk, as well as Contact in the Desert, Human Origins, and the 5D Las Vegas event. So 6 more scheduled conferences next year. I'm also doing my Antarctica and Mysteries of South America trip, and that talks more about the megaliths and how they could have been formed, how huge they are. Highest concentration of megalithic architecture in the world is Cuzco and the Sacred Valley right next to it, and that surrounding area is just incredible, the kind of craftsmanship that went into creating these massive walls. So that's another one of my talks, as well as the hidden anomalies of Antarctica.
So are there any locals, people that live there? I don't mean necessarily scientists that are there for the duration of whatever project their funded project is, but are there any locals? And let's say we even include those who are living there for a year doing whatever science. What's the hype? Does it match the hype you and I know here, moving through the social media circle, the YouTube circle, the Gaia TV circle? Is it filled with buzz? Are they talking about this stuff too? Or is it something completely different?
So you ask how many people live down there. Well, humans aren't really accustomed to living in these extreme Arctic environments. Keep in mind that Iceland was only inhabited by the Vikings a little over 1,000 years ago. Greenland shortly after that, and then that colony went missing, I believe, and I write about in my book, Sacred Places, North America, 108 Destinations, that those Vikings migrated to North America, much more temperate climate, where they mated with and assimilated with the Native Americans. When the first sailors were going up and down the coast, they would comment on the white Indians up and down the eastern seaboards. So Antarctica never attracted any kind of permanent settlement of humans. It was just completely uninhabited until the first bases started coming in a little over 100 years ago. And even those were seasonal. Humans have only been living year-round in Antarctica in the last few decades. And it is, at South Pole, 4 months of complete black darkness. So it does your head in. Plus at Pole, it's high static electricity. It is also a high elevation, so people are winded easily. And it's just very hard living. Right now, I mentioned the first of the base workers are starting to arrive, but Just a month ago, there were only 1,000 people in Antarctica, just the skeleton crew of the bases that stay open year round. So really not a lot of humans down there. So if you were an ET or some kind of breakaway civilization group that didn't want to be found or seen or known about under the ice, which as I mentioned is very geothermically active and creates these giant domes of ice over the top of them, that's a great place to hide out. And it always has been.
Do you think it might have been different back whatever time it was, if the ETs were down there doing their thing, be it the elevation, keeping people away, or do you think it's because, I mean, in other words, do you think they were able to do what they need to do, being it's so cold?
Well, if we're talking about extraterrestrials, it's all speculation, of course, because who knows how they adapt to cold. Right. Maybe they love it. But if we're talking about a breakaway civilization of humans, such as the Nazis surviving World War II down there are definitely many challenges that would affect people. First being that very long winters, very dark, very cold. Then you get super cold, Keith. Then you're into the real intense cold that would kill you if you were out without gloves or a hat, for example, for a few minutes. Then you get the big storms whipping through. I mean, we got storms too, but they were docile in comparison to what I've heard real winter Arctic or Antarctic storms all about. And I love skiing. I love being in the mountains and being outdoors in the winter, but there are certain extreme situations you don't want to put yourself in. But this really highlights the whole point of there being areas that are sheltered from the outside storms under the ice with geothermal activity. So hot water, hot springs. We felt a few. We put our feet in one in Deception Island and it was warm. Had the tide not been coming in and washing out this particular hot spring we read about in the Lonely Planet Antarctica book, could have laid down and had a soak. And certainly the accounts I've read of New Schwabenland, it was chosen because of the Schumacher Ponds, which was the name of the pilot who discovered them and landed a seaplane in them. And they explored around there also with the U-boats going under the ice. In my presentation, I show Antarctica free of ice, where there are massive fjords under the ice that just go on for dozens of miles, sometimes even hundreds of miles. It's a pretty good chance that Antarctica is actually two continents. One in Western Antarctica, where we were, the newer side, and then the very old Eastern Antarctica, and there could be a waterway right between the two. No confirmation if anyone's ever made it through, but some of the maps that I've seen of Antarctica free of ice, you can get through, including some of the very old maps too. The Bocce map shows it free of ice, which is really interesting. That Piri Reis map showed the islands off Antarctica still covered in ice to this day, but are changing. And there is extreme melting going on in certain parts of Antarctica, but also, and this is so interesting, it's rising in snow and ice level and is actually colder in certain parts of the continent, making this possible. So even though there is melting, NASA came out with this red and blue map 2 years ago, there is also an accumulation of ice. So somehow Mother Nature has this way to balance itself out where the sea levels aren't experiencing a dramatic rise from all the melting.
I'm ready to dive in, bro. Once you get to Antarctica and you go there for the reason of putting your feet on every continent. Okay, let's move into the. I heard this little bird sit on my shoulder and whispered in my ear that they may be a this or a that down there. Where did these excursions take you? Did you discover any certain things that you would like to share with us that, some of us might be biting our nails for? To know.
Okay, so starting at the New Year's Eve party in Ushuaia, talking to people who had real information, real travelers that were really going down there year after year, including a captain who has been doing over 20 years of trips. And I was talking to him for over an hour, and this is where it all started, my line of questioning. But first of all, he has actually even been to Neuschwabenland. He was looking for some of those darts that the Luftwaffe dropped for demarking the boundaries in Neuschwabenland. He couldn't find any, but he knows people that have found them. So there are souvenir hunters still diving into this stuff. So I asked him about the UFO under the ice. That was the first. There's these pictures of a massive craft, reportedly 3 miles long, that's being seen with melting ice around it and is now visible during the summer. There's also talk of pyramids poking through the ice, as well as antediluvian civilization. So that's hearkening back to a civilization before our own, and talk about megalithic buildings. This is some of the Corey Good material that he said he knows that there are archaeological digs under the ice, through the ice, and they're pulling out woolly mammoths and other exotic mammals, as well as very, very tall, human-like giants. He calls them pre-Adamites. So this is the Corey Good material. Take it how you will. I categorize it in my speculation section of my talk because I can't prove it one way or another. But he says there are several under ice bases there as well of this breakaway civilization, a giant corporate conglomerate, almost like the movie Avatar. But they exist there. They have headquarters or certain people that live down there. And then the last thing I was asking about was this massive hole under the ice, very close to the South Pole. And that is not that there's confirmation on the hole, but there is definitely confirmation there is a huge no-fly zone area over the eastern portion of the South Pole. And that is where the
I've always heard that. I've always heard that there was truly a no-fly zone.
Yeah, there truly is. And that's where whistleblower Brian S., who talked to Linda Moulton Howe, has placed it when he was trying to fly from Pole to the Davis base for an emergency medical evacuation. It was very time persistent that they get there on time for this person's safety. They could have died. So they defied the orders, flew over that no-fly zone and saw the hole. And it's absolutely massive. He said you could fly a plane into it. It's so big. And some reports that Admiral Byrd himself, who was also airman, said the same thing, that it was so big you could fly a plane into it. South Pole is over 2 miles of ice, 2.2 miles of ice. So this could be huge. And if it just goes down to the bedrock, that's a massive cavity. So this Brian S. said that he saw a road leading from Amundsen Scott South Pole Station towards the hole, like a cat track could drive along this road, and then a road leading down into it. So it is being accessed. Now, if it's true that there are NSA that work at South Pole, then they probably are protecting this. If there's no trace of NSA down there, nobody knows anything about that. I'd have to go to Pole to find that out, and I may have a chance to go back with a film crew this season.
Dig
maybe
that.
In the future. Yeah.
Inner Earth? Question mark. You don't want to touch that or what?
That would be an Inner Earth.
All right.
Sure
well, we're
would.
going in there, right?
Yeah.
Man, I get the feeling that you and I can hang out in a bar and have a beer and just sit and bullshit for hours. A lot of it, I believe that it's very, very likely they'll have solid concrete evidence. But being an intuitive, watching the play of the people in this arena, there's another language, Brad, that begins to happen when you pay attention to things that most people don't. You start understanding something that doesn't require, so to speak, evidence. Of course, no one wants to step into a hole and look foolish. But there's something that begins to reveal itself. And so, that being said, I can see the great possibility of inner Earth, whole of the north, whole in the south, beings living in the earth, and all those things that Corey, David, Emery, Randy, you, other people, and that play in this arena a lot, that point to, that say, this is actually happening. Most people had no idea that Hitler even went to Argentina, then Antarctica. They thought he popped himself in the mouth with a pistol and Ava took a suicide pill. That's not what happened at all. No. So, and so all these history book ideas, they're just ridiculously not true.
Yeah, it's a good point about the escaped Nazis, and that was one of my objectives when I was driving through Argentina. Primarily, some escaped Nazis in Bolivia. In fact, here's a funny little story reading to Emily. We'd take turns reading to each other or entertaining each other when the other's driving. I would always read out loud the next destination we would go to, and in southern Bolivia, right in the Lonely Planet, is about Klaus Barbie, the butcher of lion, escaped justice and moved to where was it, Potosi, Bolivia, or somewhere in southern Bolivia, and lived out his life in the back of a lumber mill, and that's where he died of old age. So there's a lot of Nazis and Nazi stories down there. I also include this in my Mysteries of South America conference talk. And we went to the Eden Hotel. I took the tour, and that was owned by the Eichhorns, who are big financiers and sympathizers of the Third Reich. Had dinner with Hitler many times. And there are documents showing that he was turning up there after the war. So I asked the tour guide, and they have to be skeptical on the tour and in the video, but showing the evidence. And I took him aside and I said, well, what do you really think? Do you think that Hitler escaped? Do you think he was really here? He goes, he definitely was here. There are some old people in town of La Falda, which is very Germanic, still is, that were young chambermaids that worked at the Eden Hotel that have a living memory of the guy. Him and Eva Braun and Martin Bormann, they all escaped. They never were brought to justice. Unfortunately, it was a cover
Brad,
story.
I want to toss this out there. I want you to play some ping pong with me. So Hitler decides he's going to fool everyone and make them think that he and Ava committed suicide. So with this kind of power, he's the most wanted man alive at this time. So he could have went basically anywhere. But as you said earlier, it's a very, very tough place to exist, which makes your ability to remain hidden the chances even better. That's not the type of cat he was. He went there and painstakingly went through these elements because there was something of interest. Of course, he wanted power. He had power, and he wanted more. So I tend to believe that he was down there for a reason. And that reason has to be, at least, we have to be somewhat near the mark that it had to do with something not of this earth, or something to the level that could be completely out of this world, to use the phrase.
Yeah. In 1943, Admiral Dolence made a very cryptic statement that they had created an impregnable fortress for our Fuhrer in the realm of the ice. And that in some terms they called it the Shangri-La, or this place to escape in Antarctica, presumably in New Schwabenland, because the U-boats also going under the ice could explore places of this planet that no human has ever been. And I believe that they were all over Antarctica as well as South America. And there are still huge land tracts in Chile and Argentina. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of acres that were bought up pre-World War II, were just like their own perimeter, didn't let anybody in. Just keep in mind that South America in that post-World War II time frame was back and forth with fascist dictators all over the place, supported by our own CIA, who would often depose democratically elected leaders to put in a fascist leader. And fascism was the type of government in Nazi Germany and Italy. Mussolini termed the phrase, and it's basically government that controls corporations. Now it's actually the other way around. I call it neo-fascism, when the corporations with so much wealth and power control the government. So they had land holdings in South America. A lot of the scientists that worked on these projects and the Skoda Works and Penamunde, either they came over to America as paperclip scientists like Werner von Braun and Hermann Oberth, or they disappeared down to South America. And they have the option. I think Hitler probably did go to Base 211, or they also called it the New Berlin base. But again, it's not that great of a place to be long term. You kind of miss lakes and trees and temperate weather. And so Hitler was mostly in South America after World War II. And he died, I think the best accounts are in Paraguay around 1960. And may still have a secret grave below a prominent old hotel in the capital of Paraguay. That's according to Len Casson, several other researchers who've done books on this that I've known through the ages. I did go to the very close to the Inalco house near San Carlos de Bariloche. There too, a lot of escaped Nazis all around the lake. It's like a German Bavarian setting in Germantown. It's actually beautiful, great place. It was Emily's favorite area in South America. And we were there for, I was on coast to coast from Bariloche on December 21st. So it was winter solstice up here in the northern hemisphere, southern summer solstice down there. And so the days were really long. And then after that, we started driving all the way down to as far as you can go south, the southernmost city in the world, Ushuaia, Argentina. And that's when the Antarctica trip started up.
It must feel so, or does it feel so awkward to be so far away from home, somewhat to use the word disconnected, because it's just such a distance. Did you feel vulnerable there other than the elements? I mean, just being in the, dear Lord, the unknown, complete unknown. Did you feel somewhat kind of vulnerable, freaky, weird?
It would seem that it would be that way, but it wasn't. Well, in hindsight, looking back, it was kind of weird that when we left Argentina, we got stamped out in our passport and did not get stamped in to anywhere until we got back to Argentina and got stamped back in. So for 26 days, it was no man's land. So that's a misconception that it's hard to travel down there. All we did was submit our sailing itinerary, and we could pretty much go where we wanted to go. We had a Zodiac on the sailboat. We'd drop it in the water with the motor and go to a penguin colony, go to visit these different research stations. Some were all closed up. Another one of the Argentinian ones fully boarded up, but they always leave a room open. You can just break a zip tie and go in there, and there's emergency food and rations. Because it's survival down there. If you get stuck somewhere overnight, your life is at risk. So it's cool that
Did you travel light? Did you travel light or middle or heavy or just enough, exactly what you needed, or how did that go about?
Yeah, just about what we needed. Sort of like a duffel bag and a media camera bag, and my laptop bag is what I brought. Emily about the same. But we were always wearing our winter clothes, except for those 2 days where we were sunning on the deck of the boat, and one shower in Arktowski, one shower in Vernansky base, and then one shower on the boat. And it was basically, one shower a week kind of thing, and wearing winter clothes all the time. And our stove in the boat malfunctioned, and it was really smoky in the cabin, so we voted not to use it. So basically we didn't even have a heater, but it was wearing several layers And then when you had to go up to the deck to do watch every 3 hours, 6 hours off, 3 hours on, when we were sailing, it was wear everything you got: hoodie, hat, ski goggles.
Damn, son, you must have really wanted this trip.
and
All
a gator for the nose. So really, all skin was covered with winter ski gloves and a very heavy winter jacket. Everything also being water resistant, not waterproof, but you get sprayed a lot on the deck. And boy, there were some huge waves and huge icebergs too. That was pretty daunting. The first thing we saw before we saw land was these massive 30-story icebergs that were just floating off to sea. So we had to be up there to help with the watch. It was really important. And then once we were in the channel, sometimes there would be some sea ice. You'd have to take turns with a long pole and poke it away. Plus, we helped out with some of the daily chores and keeping the boat clean. And that was our home for 26 days.
So, Brad, when you were down there, be it South America, Antarctica, tell me about some of your findings, something that you went to look for and you actually found, or you stumbled upon something, be it someone, a guide, or some hype you heard, or just magically came upon something that's just this wow factor about your journeys.
Well, that's what I was looking for. I wanted the wow factor. And apart from one research station that was very reluctant to tell us something in the UFO file category, the X-Files, otherwise it was a complete blank. Nobody knew anything about all these questions we asked, what might be under the ice. When we were at the Brown base, Argentinian base on Palmer Peninsula, one of the girls did not want to tell us, and Emily and I got it out of the guy a little later, and he said that there was some talk between the bases, and another one of their Argentinian bases called Belgrano 2 had a UFO sighting late last year. It's like craft, lights, orb, nature. Everybody ran out to see it and basically told the other bases about it, and then he told us. So that was really the only, and it's hearsay, story that we got about anything extraterrestrial down there, except confirmation that there absolutely is a great big no-fly zone near the South Pole.
I bet South America in and of itself was just really, really cool. I'm sure the spiritual vibe there is just amazing. And I'm sure the people there are amazing. Did you have a passion to go to South America, any place in particular? And have you ever been to Machu Picchu? That's what I want to ask you. Have you ever been to Machu Picchu?
Well, I have now. Yeah, spent a couple days there actually with the Residence Academy, 150 delegates, including Nassim Haramein, Brian Forrester, when we were in Cuzco in the Sacred Valley. And then to look at these megalithic structures with these people who have a new idea of how they were created was quite an eye-opening experience. It was all I could have asked to go to these megalithic sites, including Machu Picchu, and talk to experts and just gather as much information as I could, because there's so many mysteries about how they were constructed, what tools were used, how they were transported. And Brian Forrester and Nassim Haramein have some new ideas using new physics and new concepts in science.
Like what, my bro?
Well, auditive levitation for moving huge blocks. And
well, that's a fact, because Tibetan Buddhists, if you look at the Tibetan Buddhist monasteries in the Himalayas, there are no roads that go up there. How are they getting these megalithic stones up there? And, there's actually, YouTube it, Google it, and they'll tell you there's a certain meditation they would use. They would incorporate music, and they would use these certain mantras, and we know that sound levitates objects. So I have no doubt that it's very likely that levitation through sound was probably part of the transport of these megalithic stones.
Yeah. An example I give in my talk is how an opera singer can shatter a wine glass with her voice. That's just using sound and frequency to affect something of a very material, hard nature. So taken a few steps further, match the frequency of any piece of matter, and you can render that object weightless or shatter it or move it. And that's what I think the ancients did. One of my few appearances on Ancient Aliens, I talked about it at a site called Nam Madal in Micronesia, how this site was created with these megalithic long basalt stones that came from the other side of the island, and they had to go over a water passage. And to move them that distance around a very rocky shoreline and over water to the other side of this other island on Ponape, it makes no sense unless you can consider that the ancients had high technology and could move things using auditive levitation. And that's one of the principles of these megaliths being moved from the quarry to the site. The other big mystery is how they're so expertly fitted together at such very odd angles, sometimes a curving Y joint, and all 3 points are perfectly fit together where you can't even put a piece of paper or a credit card in there. And you never see chisel marks. What you do see is this marshmallowing of the megaliths, including sometimes little nodes on the bottom that kind of pop out, but you never see any chisel in them. Another characteristic, certain stones looks like they were a trowel was used on them, much like someone who puts up plaster will use a trowel to smooth out the plaster. You see those trowel marks on some of these megalithic stones, like they were soft at one point and they got into position and just basically slowly melted into position while an artisan was shaping the edges so perfectly that there are no chisel marks on them. So Brian Forrester, Nassim Haramein, who comes out of this new science, were proposing that there was a cold plasma technique that was used that could be rendering these giant megaliths soft, put into place, so expertly fitted, which, by the way, can withstand huge earthquakes that way. And these very, very old megaliths outlive the Spaniards' inferior architecture, the Inca architecture, and these real old megaliths are pre-Incan. And so they predate what Brian and Sim were talking about, a pre-cataclysmic age, an age of megalithic buildings so big they call it Cyclopean architecture. Is even bigger than megalithic. The biggest there is Cyclopean architecture, named after Cyclops, the giant with the one eye of Greek mythology, who could only be so big and strong to move some of these blocks. Well, that's the legend. The name lives on, but now new science is interpreting how this could have all been done.
For those who are, welcome everyone to Center of Light Radio. I am now posting a link in the forum. Don't insult my intelligence, please, and go to this. Please go to the link, but don't insult my intelligence, say he's blowing on it or he's got magnets. You go to this Facebook link, you're going to find this gentleman. His page is dedicated to his telekinesis. It will wow you. It's not a matter of believing what I'm saying or believing that this is real. It's real. It's about when you see such things, it puts you into a certain space. So you and I were talking about using sound and levitation to move these megalithic stones. So this gentleman, he does all these different types of telekinesis, moving cans, moving glasses, moving pencils on top of things. It's quite a phenomenal feat. We are slowly but surely going to be moving towards the end of the show, Brad. We got about 15, 20 more minutes. I'm going to take a short pause and come back and let us know whatever you want to share with us about your work, your future, what you're up to, what's happening with you. Is that cool?
Yeah, for sure.
Everybody, Keith Anthony Blanchard, Center of Light Radio, going to be right back. Enjoy some Lavender Soul. We're coming out with a new album. Let me show you the album cover. This is the album cover, which happens to be the soundtrack of my bestseller, The Divine Principle, Anchoring Heaven on Earth. What a cool collection. You're interested, contact me. I'd be more than happy to send you the links to my lifelong work. Keith Anthony Blanchard, Center of Light Radio, Lavender Soul, a song called Breathe. Be right back.
Trust that I will guide you in whatever you do. Just remember to breathe and do your very best to live in love, give in love, be in love, and love you shall receive.
Welcome back to Center of Light Radio. Keith Anthony Blanchard here. Yanava, all my tribe. It's good to see you. I appreciate your support tonight. I'm speaking with my good friend, Mr. Brad Olsen. Tonight, the topic is hidden. I can't speak today. I don't know what it is. Hidden anomalies in Antarctica and South America. Brad, welcome back to Center of Light, my friend. What is it would you like to leave us with about the hidden anomalies in Antarctica and South America? As what's coming down the pike for you, working on other books and stuff?
Yeah, I am working on my third and final book in the Esoteric Series. I have a Future Esoteric and Modern Esoteric. Third one will be Beyond Esoteric, out next year around this time. And what would I leave you with Antarctica? Just if you're hungry for travel, you want to see one of the most unique places on the planet, go to the ice continent. It's really like taking a trip out of this world. It's about as much of an alien planet experience as you can get without leaving Earth. There's a lot of mysteries down there, a lot of speculation what could be. I did my best to try to find out. I'd be interested to hear if other people go down there and what they find out. So I travel, I write books about travel. That was how I started my career. And now I'm doing these esoteric subjects and speaking about them at UFO conferences and human origin conferences. And there's a lot about us in this world that we have not been told, and a lot about history that has been rewritten. and so that's the nature of these esoteric subjects that I write about. I just feel like we have a right to know. And I've always been interested in these subjects. And now with my travel background, putting it all together into these Esoteric Series guidebooks. And that's my latest series in a decade. I usually do 3 books in 1 decade every 3 years or so, and this will be right on schedule.
Brad, thank you for joining me in Center of Light Radio. Keep in touch with me, sir. You write a new book. You got a new thing coming up. You want people to know about it? Hit me up. We'll set up a show.
Yeah. Also, we'll just, if you want to follow me, you can go to bradolsen.com, BRADOLSEN.com, Esoteric Series on Facebook and YouTube channel, CCC Publishing, Esoteric Series. Follow me on Twitter, CCC Publishing, and check out my books on www.cccpublishing.com. And there you can find out all my books and many of the authors that I publish through CCC Publishing.
I just posted every one of your links in the forum, and I've been doing that through the entire show. Brad, thank you, brother. Keep me posted on what's happening with you, sir. I'd like to see you again.
Sounds good, my man. We'll do it again sometime.
I'd love to. Everyone, Brad Olsen. I would love to go to some crazy place like that. I went to India. I loved it. I asked him the question, what was it like to be in a land so far away? And I would agree with him. I was very, very comfortable in my skin. It was, thinking about home, of course, you're across the world or down below the world or wherever you may be. But when you're comfortable in your skin and you know who you are, that lightning rod keeps you firm. It keeps you solid. Keith Anthony Blanchard, the Center of Light Radio. Also, I'm going to be opening up a Facebook page. I'm going to start a new Facebook page really soon, group, and it's be called Save the Children or whatever cool name I'm going to come up with. I've been noticing people all over social media. Now, in today's time, when a kid goes missing, everyone is sharing it, and they're finding these people. They're finding these children. They're finding these children. Maybe one day we can do a show with someone about what's happening in these natural forest. People just end up missing. They go take a whiz behind the tree and dad's standing 20 feet away and they're gone, right? But I'm thinking about, so stay in touch with me, keep up with me about this particular page. Let's help these kids out. There's a lot of mad scientists, a lot of crazy nutcases in the world, and we got to be strong. Keith Anthony Blanchard here, Center of Light Radio. I'm going to be doing a presentation really soon about I hate your guts. It ain't what you think. There's a lot of hate floating around, a lot of finger pointing. The Democrats, the libtards, and the Republicans, everybody going at each other. It's nonsense. Why is this happening? Why is everybody browbeating everybody else? What can we do? Do we actually engage to make it better, or are we part of the problem by doing so? I'll be seeing you really soon. Keith Anthony Blanchard, Center of Light Radio. Share my work. Stick around. I have lots more coming in the future about lots of really cool things. I'll be seeing you soon. Peace, love, and always live in the light.